Now, Secretary Mayorkas, thank you for your public service. I'd like to discuss with you the history of the southern border. In September 1969, a few years before Watergate consumed this presidential administration, the president launched Operation Intercept, which basically shut down the southern border. Less than 3 weeks later, that operation was stopped because it largely failed to address the issues at the border.
Mr. Self, if everyone knows they're going to be checked at the border, it would seem to me that they might hesitate in bringing some narcotics across.
That's right, and that's part of the plan. Given the good previous public announcement that we're going to have this kind of an operation, at 2:30 yesterday, the public was informed via a message by the Attorney General and the Secretary of the Treasury, and as the result, the word got out to our smugglers, and we saw all the cars turn around, as a matter of fact. So there haven't been many seizures, and we're not interested in seizures. We're interested in keeping the stuff out, and I think we're succeeding.
That operation was stopped because it largely failed to address the issues at the border.
In keeping the stuff out, and I think we're succeeding.
You haven't found much contraband then coming across these checkpoints?
No, very little. A few pills, mostly a lot of tomatoes that had to be thrown away, and a little liquor. But as far as narcotics, the answer is no, and this is the way we want it.
Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 1969? I'll give you a hint. This Republican president resigned.
Congressman, I know the president, President Nixon. Congressman, I'd prefer not to answer questions of history right now. My focus is on the work
I'm going to help you with
Homeland Security.
I'm going to help you with this. In the 1980s, the Republican president had promised morning in America again. But the issues at the southern border continued, prompting him to order a partial shutdown of the border in 1985. This operation, aptly named Operation Intercept 2, was stopped after only a few days because it also failed to address the issues at the border. And this was a president that knew about these issues because he was a former governor of California. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 1985?
Narcotics addiction and the use of dangerous drugs is as damaging to this nation and its future generations as any disease spread by a germ. The economic hardship to some and the inconvenience to travelers cannot be balanced on the same scale with shattered lives, heartbroken families, and the astronomical cost of courts, judges, juvenile facilities, law enforcement agencies, and the rehabilitation and treatment costs required to treat the addicted. There is only one way to stop an epidemic, and that is to isolate the virus that causes it and destroy it. And Operation Intercept is trying to do just that.
Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 1985?
Ronald Reagan,
Thank you.
Congressman.
The border issues continued into this century. In 2006, the president, who was also familiar with the border because he was a former governor of Texas, declared that, quote, for decades, the United States has not been in complete control of its borders, end quote. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 2006?
President Bush,
Okay.
Congressman.
Under President Biden, we've faced the worst border crisis in our history. ORR received referrals for more than 350,000 unaccompanied children over the course of the first 3 years of this presidency. That is more than 120,000 unaccompanied minors passing through ORR's custody annually. This is unprecedented. Prior to President Biden, the largest single year of total referrals was about 69,000.
In the prior administration, the Republican president tried to solve their issues at the border, and he failed. I would now like to show a video of what was actually happening during the prior administration in 2018.
This is a pit stop on a punishing journey to the U.S. border, and it's still just the beginning. Migrants from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador continue to make their way north, fleeing poverty, persecution, and gang violence. The caravan now includes an estimated 7,200 migrants, and more are expected to join tomorrow, potentially pushing the number past 10,000.
You think we're letting that caravan come into this country? You can forget it.
15 months into his first term, President Trump's signature campaign promise,
Building a great wall on the southern border,
was not happening. Congress gave him funding only to replace existing barriers. So in April, when a caravan of Central American migrants set out to seek asylum in the U.S., Trump sounded the alarm and called up the National Guard, citing a drastic surge of illegal activity on the southern border.
They say this is a manufactured crisis. That's their new soundbite.
Stop manufacturing a crisis.
Crisis.
Manufactures crises.
Every network has a manufactured crisis. This is every one of them. It's like they, send out to everybody, let's use this soundbite.
Crisis.
I think this is a manufactured crisis, and this national emergency is completely made up.
This is a manufactured crisis.
Manufactured crisis.
Manufacture a crisis.
Manufactured crisis.
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 Do you think this is a manufactured crisis?
We face a crisis, a real, serious, and sustained crisis at our borders.
The president is lying to the American people about a national emergency. There is no emergency at the border.
This is a manufactured crisis.
The president has said that there is somehow this crisis at the border. That's a lie. That couldn't be further from the truth.
We have a president of the United States who has created a fiction about a crisis at the border.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
So I'm expecting a declaration of a national emergency around a fake crisis that doesn't exist.
This made-up crisis at the border.
Holding the American people hostage must stop manufacturing a crisis.
It's not facts and alternative facts. It is downright lies to try to make a political point.
If illegal immigrants are unhappy with the conditions in the quickly built or refitted detention centers, just tell them not to come. All problems solved.
There is no national emergency at the border. It's all made up. It's presidential fiction.
Because there clearly is no emergency. There's no reason for this on border security grounds.
We don't have a crisis at the border.
Much has been made about the fact that we have said that this is a manufactured crisis. And in many ways, it is manufactured in that it is wholly unnecessary.
President Trump is manufacturing a crisis and declaring a made-up national emergency in order to seize power and subvert the Constitution.
There is no crisis in arrivals.
We are focusing on a crisis that does not exist at the border.
And Trump, you shut down the government over a fake crisis at the border.
This border emergency is nothing more than a manufactured crisis, and California will not be part of this political theater.
May 2019, the situation got even worse. Politico published an article on June 5th, 2019 that was titled, "Border Arrests Rose to Nearly 132,000 in May as the border surge continues." City Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 2018 and 2019?
President Trump.
I think he was totally wrong. I was at the border this past weekend. What he's proposing is going on there is mythology. It is not reality.
A non-crisis at the border that's really not fooling anybody.
This shutdown that he caused by creating a phony crisis actually did cause one danger after another.
But no sign of the national emergency that the president has been talking about. As a matter of fact, it's pretty tranquil down here.
So we do have a problem at the southern border, and Democrats should not deny that we don't.
Congressman.
And now we're here in 2023. Citing Mayorkas last month in June, border crossings declined to the lowest level in over 2 years, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Border crossings last month declined to the lowest level in over 2 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In just over 2 years under Secretary Mayorkas, more people have entered our country illegally than in the 12 years of the Obama and Trump administrations combined.
Based on the facts that you testified to, here's this chart. Shows that under Trump, there were 133,000 border apprehensions in May 2019, and last month, under the Biden administration, there were less than 100,000 border apprehensions.
Misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to
So
exclude the smuggling
do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died.
The facts show the southern border is doing better last month than it was under Trump in May 2019.
As part of my plan to secure the border on day one of my new term in office, I will sign an executive order making clear to federal agencies that under the correct interpretation of the law, going forward, the future children of illegal aliens will not receive automatic U.S. citizenship. It's things like this that bring millions of people to our country, and they enter our country illegally.
Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said the Democrat talking point, quote, this problem didn't start under Biden. Look, I get if you're a partisan spinner, you got to figure out something to say about the absolute catastrophe that has played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. And what was it in 2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with any catch and release, nothing to do with Remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000, it drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up. And that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden.
Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for your public service. And now the Republicans want to impeach you. Good luck with that one.
Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartel.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
To an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign.
Good luck with that one.
And I will tell you, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they've never had a political leader undermine them. They despise you, Mr. Secretary, because you're willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. This is a crisis. It's a disgrace. And you won't even admit this human tragedy is a crisis.